Tall Tales and Cocktails is a tipsy and raunchy good time for adult audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, listeners. We are
Hello.
so happy if you have joined us again, or if this is even your first time and you just decided to pick this episode as your first episode. Today we are talking about some American folklore.
Yes.
Which is cool. Because there is some modern mythology that I think gets glazed over a lot. Mythology doesn't just pertain to ancient stuff. There's some modern American stuff. So today we're going to talk about Paul.
We heard of them.
I guarantee it. I know I heard about them when I was probably in my kindergarten years. I feel like you learn about both of them at a very young age. I think everyone knows about the blue ox and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to hear more about it. It's been a very long time since I've heard anything about Paul Bunyan.
Same.
And diving into Johnny Appleseed, like, I forgot who he was. It's just such a household name in the U.S. That I realized I didn't know a lot about who he actually was. So that was super cool. But yeah, this is the first time we've hung out in a while.
Yeah.
This is the first time we've hung out in a while.
Yeah.
What have you been up to for the last couple weeks?
Well, I actually went to a Norse party last night.
Which is awesome. I was supposed to go, but I'm an anxious introvert child and decided to stay home.
That's totally cool. Yeah, it was fun. There was a scout Edda. And so we had to gather things and find things throughout the house and outside. And we had performances. I burned my new fans for the first time.
I'm so sad I missed that.
It was fun. It was good.
We gotta have a burn night soon.
Yes, we gotta burn again.
I gotta burn my levy wand. I haven't burned a fire levy wand in 2017 is when my first promo video came out, and that was the last time I burned a fire levy wand.
I've never seen a fire levy wand before.
You're gonna lose your shit.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I'm gonna have to practice some with mine, so maybe one day I'll
yeah, I would totally
have to give it a burn.
I would totally let you play
mine, so maybe one day I'll
yeah, I would totally
have to give it a burn.
I would totally let you play with mine. Yeah, I haven't been up to a whole lot other than what I'm always up to, which is video games. I've fallen off of the Valheim train a bit because we beat all the bosses, so I'm kind of waiting until they release new content since it is early access, but Michael, my boyfriend, and I have been playing The Forest, which is a horror survival game.
Ooh.
So basically you like crash land in an airplane on this island, and whoever the main person starting the lobby is, which was Michael, you have, and then this creepy ass zombie covered in blood picks up your child and walks out of the airplane, carrying away your child. So then basically you were just these castaways from a plane on an island. It's kind of like Lost, I guess, in a way. I never really watched it, but it seemed like a similar premise. And you just have to build like a base. Similar premise. And you just have to build like a base and figure out how to eat and find fresh water. And then there's also these zombies that attack you out of nowhere that giggle.
That giggle?
They giggle. Like you will just hear like out of the corner of like the room.
Were just so tired of like the norm.
We're
just so tired of like the norm zombie sound.
Yeah, they don't.
Like, they've got to do something else than just.
They don't make the normal groans or like brains. They giggle and they're fast.
Oh no!
It's very terrifying. We play about a half hour at a time before. Very unsettling and terrifying. And I have the fucking hiccups.
Oh no!
Oh, we might be good.
Just, like, take a deep breath and swallow 3 times.
Okay, I think I'm good. Okay.
Yeah. I never even thought about having the hiccups on a podcast.
Right? Because we drink for our podcast. I was like,
yeah,
fuck.
I get the hiccups, too, sometimes.
I might cut this shit out, but maybe I'll leave it. But yeah, that's what I've been up to. Just playing video games as per usual. I have been working a bit just playing video games as per usual. I have been working a bit more on my world building stuff. Maybe I'll talk about it more in depth on the podcast eventually. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Our topics today, we said earlier, it's Paul Bunyan and Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah, we've got a drink to go with this episode.
We do. What's our drink, Severin?
It is an Appletini, which is comprised of a shot of vodka, a shot of pucker, and a splash of sweet and sour.
And it is delicious. Apple martinis are actually my favorite go-to cocktail. So actually, Severin was a part of it as well. My partners threw a big surprise party because I've always wanted one, and they did it so well. It was like a scavenger hunt into a surprise party, and they all made me a giant batch of Appletinis, and I drank it all night long. And I had a rule that if my drink was never empty, I only had one drink. So I never had a rule that if my drink was never empty, I only had one drink. So I never finished my drink, and I just kept refilling it. And I don't know how many times I did that. I was very drunk, but I only had one drink because I never finished it.
There you go.
But I love a good Appletini. I'm going to kick us off this.
Let's hear about it.
Let's do it. I got to find my notes real quick. All right, so obviously with American folklore, there's the legend and then there's the true story.
Mm-hmm.
I think our folklore is less like ancient mythology because they actually, like Johnny Appleseed is not a god. He's not some mythological being. He really did exist, but there was just aspects of who he was that were turned into legends and stories.
Right, embellishments of, like,
yes,
the type of person that he was.
That's the word I'm looking for, embellishment. But so Johnny Appleseed is an American legend. He's known to have traveled around Ohio and Pennsylvania predominantly,
Ohio.
Which is where you're from.
Yeah.
I was actually geeking out while I was studying because he primarily did a lot of his stuff in Ohio.
We definitely talked a lot about him in school.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just like, how can you not?
I mean,
about him in school.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just like, how can you not?
I mean, obviously, he's from the area, and he did a lot in the area. He also went to Indiana and Illinois as well. But he basically traveled around and planted apple orchards and told stories to children. He was also a missionary. His favorite book was the Bible. Whatever floats your boat, go for it. That's like what he did. He was described as a cheerful and gentle man. He loved animals, and he was also a vegetarian later in life because he didn't agree with eating animals.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Johnny Appleseed was a vegetarian. He chose to live a simple and homeless life and preferred to sleep under the trees rather than a cabin. He believed that suffering on Earth led to greater rewards in the afterlife. So he actually chose to deprive himself of luxuries he could have afforded. And very easily had. And just chose to live this life of poverty and being a vegetarian and traveling and not really having an actual home. I think he was more...
He is depicted that way. I feel like when you see pictures of him, he looks like he's got shabby clothes.
Yeah, and that's very much how he was. I don't think he would have viewed it as homelessness. There's actually this band I really like, Wookiefoot, and they have a song called Home Free, and they say, I'm not homeless, I'm home free. And I think that's kind of how he viewed it. He was home free. He could just go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted and spread the goodness of the apple. He was all about apples were the cure for everything.
An apple a day.
It keeps the doctor away. Yes. So that's pretty cool. He could have really been a terrible rich human being, but just chose to live this very simple life.
That's cool.
Traveling
I like
around
that.
helping people. Yeah, super cool. He was a devoted Christian, like I said earlier, and he was also familiar with herbal medicine. So he would actually treat sick animals in the wild, and
he was a bit of a botanist then.
Yeah,
kind of all around.
He did have a knowledge of botany, and he could treat like certain low-level wounds and stuff like that. By no means was he a doctor, but he did understand how to treat certain sicknesses and injuries and stuff like that. The legend topped with a mush pan for a hat.
Yes. I was going to ask if that was...
So that is more just legend. He didn't actually wear a pan as a hat, but in the legends he wore a mush pan. When they wrote his stories, they're like, we got to give him a cool hat. Exactly. So he would wear a pan on his head, and then he was mostly barefooted, which is true. Okay. He didn't really wear shoes often. He wore holey trousers, and he used a coffee bag as a shirt that he cut armholes into. And that is true as well. He actually did wear very simple clothes, but he didn't wear the coffee bag and stuff like that forever. He would actually trade his apple seeds and cider and stuff to get better clothing. Oh. But when he traded for clothing, sometimes he would give that clothing away to people who needed it more than he did.
Oh, okay.
So he's actually a very generous, donated things more than he felt he needed things, even though he was living this life of poverty.
Almost a modern Jesus,
kind of in a way. Like, he really is. Like, he would give you literally the shirt off of his back if you needed it.
Yeah.
He was also known to give away seeds generously to pioneers, and he very rarely asked for anything. He didn't trade for money. He would trade, like I said, for clothes or just something to eat, or letting him lay in their backyard. Like, they would offer him their cabins and beds to sleep in, but he would refuse them because he preferred to sleep under the stars.
Wow.
And the trees. Like, he just really loved nature. He preferred to sleep under the stars.
Wow.
And the trees. Like, he just really loved nature and, like, being outside.
I wonder what winters were like for him, especially, like,
yeah,
granted where he was
the Midwest does not have mild winters at all.
Even if you're, like, southern Ohio, like, they still see, like,
snow
harsh winters
and cold,
and, you know.
But I would imagine he probably took cabins at that time, but from what I saw, he almost always refused them and wanted to sleep outside. His visits were always welcomed by all the town folks, and the children in the towns were also really excited to, like, have him return, because I guess he told really beautiful stories, mostly Christian parables and stuff like that, but he had stories, because he was, like, this kind of, like, magic storyteller man that traveled the woods and just showed up out of nowhere.
If he lived today, he'd probably have a podcast.
I think Johnny Appleseed would have a podcast if he was alive today, talking all about how you need to eat apples.
Yeah.
It was once said by one of his fans in the 1871 edition of Harper's New Monthly magazine. We can hear him read now, just as he did that summer day when we were busy quilting upstairs, his voice rising, denunciatory and thrillin', strong and loud as the roar of wind and waves, then soft and soothing as the balmy airs that quivered the morning glory leaves about his gray beard. His was a strange eloquence at times, I know how to talk, and he was undoubtedly a man of genius. Adults and children alike adored his stories. But how much truth is there to the legend of Johnny Appleseed? Like, we have this generous benefactor of a man that just seems to live this super simple life and wear nothing but rags and things like that and just travel around. Like, he almost sounds like everywhere and just able to come town to town. But actually, Johnny Appleseed's real name was John Chapman.
John Chapman.
He was a real man. He was born September 26th, 1774 in Leominster, Massachusetts. His father, Nathaniel Chapman, served in the military, died during childbirth. Not with Johnny, but with some of his younger siblings.
Oh, okay.
So he was almost an orphan in a way, because his dad was always away at war and his mom had passed. When his father returned from war, he actually remarried another lady. I forgot to look up her name, but probably not that important. He just remarried, and he had 10 more children. So,
wow.
Yeah, Johnny had a lot of siblings.
Dang.
In 1792, Johnny and his 11-year-old brother set off for Ohio. I think they went ahead of the family to kind of, like, scope things out and set up a living situation for the family.
Mm-hmm.
He eventually took a apprenticeship as a horticulturalist, and then started setting off on his solo adventures to trade apple trees to the various towns and caverns.
Okay.
Or cabins. Various cabins in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And he would also provide free seeds that he would get from the various cider mills throughout. He collected cider mills in Pennsylvania on his way to Ohio.
Okay.
Because they would have all these free seeds, and he would just take them, and then he would trade them for things and to plant his own orchards and stuff like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, he was very much an entrepreneur in a way. And it almost reminds me of like Kickstarter. It's like seeds to kickstart my orchard business. So they weren't giving him funding, they were like giving him seeds. But he would plant apple, they were like giving him seeds. But he would plant apple orchards throughout the Midwest, and then periodically he would return to the apple orchards he set up to maintain the fences and till the ground and trim up the trees and gather the harvest. And then he would trade the trees, like he would dig them up and give them to people who wanted things like that, and sell them for goods to various pioneers throughout the area. And while the legends paint him out to just be this generous apple man that didn't have a lot, his orchards were actually a brilliant business strategy. So at the time, to claim land amount of acreage.
Okay.
So by planting all these orchards, he actually owned close to 1,200 acres of land.
So he looks like a poor man.
But he actually owns...
But he's rich in land.
Oh, he is
apples.
rich in land and apples. Like, he owned so much property. And at the time of his death, actually, he owned close to 1,200 acres of land. And at the time of his death, actually, he owned close to 1,200 acres of land. And that's not counting what he had already sold off before he died. Okay. But he owned close to 12 acres of land throughout Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and Pennsylvania. So he had...
Okay.
A ton of land that he owned and took care of and maintained, and just chose to just live this impoverished life.
So if you just want land, just like, I planted some seeds here.
Yeah, like, it's a very different time. Like, legally,
right.
If you had an orchard, you owned the land around the orchard.
Yeah.
So it was actually very strategic, and he kept a...
Mm-hmm.
Because he would just travel ahead of the game. And since he wasn't worried about taking possessions or belongings and just traveling himself on foot, he would beat people a lot and be able to, like, lay claim to these big, fertile areas of land.
I see.
Yeah, he was actually really intelligent about the way he did things. But the apples that Johnny grew are not what you typically think of apples. I think a lot of people, when they think Johnny Appleseed, think he was like growing like Gala or Honeycrisp apples.
Yeah.
They would just eat right off the tree, and they're super tasty and good for you.
They're probably bitter.
Yes. They were actually hardly edible. Like, they weren't... They were actually hardly edible. Like, they weren't meant to be eaten as apples. The apples he was growing were specifically used for making alcoholic ciders and Applejack, which is a type of brandy made from apples. So he was also an alcoholic, which the legends don't talk about.
Johnny Appleseed, who we all love.
Johnny Appleseed was actually an alcoholic, and he was kind of like the booze fairy is how I think about it. And the reason why he was so welcomed in all these cabins throughout the Midwest was because people really liked the booze he made.
Yeah.
So they, of course, welcomed him into their homes because cider and
Johnny
get
Appleseed's
drunk.
coming to town. I mean cider.
Yeah, and so the adults welcomed him because of the cider. The kids liked his story, so it was kind of a win-win situation for people.
Man.
So I actually wrote this down. He was actually less of a generous apple angel and more of an intelligent businessman and booze fairy. And more of an intelligent businessman and booze fairy. I'd take a booze fairy. That sounds pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't adults should have booze fairies? The tooth fairy exists. Why don't we have booze fairies?
I don't know.
I gotta figure out a stipulation for it, and I'm gonna make my partners fairies for me. I gotta decide what the trade-off is. Michael Pollan, the author of The Botany of Desire, called Johnny Appleseed the American Dionysus, because he was just getting all these pioneers drunk all the time.
Yeah.
So there's that Dionysian revelry and enjoying life, which I think is great. He was also an animal. He was also an animal lover. That is very much true. He really was a very vegetarian, and he would also save wild animals and nurse them back to health. And if he saw animals and nurse them back to health. And if he saw animals being abused by people, he would take them away. Okay. I'm not sure the legality of that, but he would save animals from being abused. At one point, he was also known to have a wolf that would follow him around as a pet because he treated the wolf's injured leg. Oh. And nursed it back to health, which is so sweet.
That's awesome.
He had a pet wolf.
How cool.
I want a pet wolf. And although he did prefer a life of poverty, he actually had many acres of land, like I said, and he planted orchards over a 50-year length, and like so many orchards that were
talk about like functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, in what way can I just kind of like not like have a real job?
Right, he had no real job.
But I
can't imagine it's easy to maintain an orchard or
no, definitely not. I mean, that's hard labor.
He was probably
for
working really hard, but he didn't
not trying
have
to downplay
do
that.
it every day. He spent a lot of his time just traveling and seeing granted the Midwest is not spectacular and it all looks the same, but
back then it maybe
that's true. I don't know what it
looked a little bit better.
There might have been more.
And it maybe
that's true. I don't know what it
looked a little bit better.
There might have been more forests and
before
interesting things, but yeah, he just wandered around and tended to his orchards. And when he died, he actually left any money that he did have from selling off his orchards and the leftover land to his sister. So he left everything to his youngest sister. And there's discrepancies about the exact nature of his death. It is believed that he either died of exposure sometime in 1845 or that he died from pneumonia on March 18th in 1845. Which, cool thing, actually the day I started doing my research...
Weird.
Right? Isn't that so weird? I was reading his story, and when I saw that his date of death was March 18th, I was like, what day is it? I know it's March, and it was March 18th, exactly.
Weird.
But yeah, still in 1845, but yeah.
Yeah.
March 18th, 1845. And he was visiting his friend William... March 18th, 1845. And he was visiting his friend William Worth in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but no one's been able to confirm that is actually when he died. And the legends also say that is the first time ever in his life that he was sick. And he was 71 when he died. And
that's actually a pretty old age.
That's the only
for that time.
Yeah, and supposedly that's the only time he was sick. And I did end up looking into it. He is not the originator of like the apple a day keeps a doctor away thing.
Yeah,
that stems back a really long time ago.
Oh,
like I mean,
Appleseed?
even the ancient Greeks and Romans knew that apples were really good for you. Him, at least I choose to believe that, but it actually was along well before Johnny Appleseed.
Whether you eat it or drink it.
Does drinking Appletinis keep the doctor away? Because I will drink Appletinis all day and keep the doctor away.
I'm curious to know how much apple is involved in these drinks. It tastes apple-y.
Well, usually I put in an apple wedge garnish, like a little slice of apple, but I forgot to buy apples for this. But I don't think those apples would protect you, because they don't. I feel like you suck a lot of the nutrients out with alcohol. I don't know how life works. That's probably not true. Alcohol. I don't know how life works. That's probably not true.
How does nutrition work?
Don't take a lot of what we say as fact when it comes to our speculations. We do our research, but some of the stuff we say is just drunken babble.
For sure.
And then pop culture references for Johnny Appleseed, actually. There's actually several bands and musicians that have title songs that are named after Johnny Appleseed. Like, literally the song titles are his name. I didn't look into any of them. I didn't recognize any of the band names, but that's kind of cool. And then Martin Short actually played Johnny Appleseed in the 1986 film Tall Tales and Legends, though it is admitted that it was greatly embellished.
Wait, this is live action?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a live action film that Martin Short was in. Do you know who Martin Short is? Did you ever see the third Santa Claus movie?
I didn't.
Did you ever see the third Santa Claus movie?
I didn't get that far into Santa Claus. I definitely watched the first one because I love the first one.
Dude, the first Santa Claus movie is brilliant. We talked about this one night. Yes, Bernard is so sexy. Yes,
was my crush.
Oh my god.
But I think like, I started
David
noticing
Krumholtz.
that...
It was even worse, but he actually played Jack Frost in the third one.
Oh.
I'm trying to think of what else Martin Short has been in off the top of my head. He's been in a lot. I think you would recognize him.
Yeah, I
if you
probably
saw
would.
him.
I just can't put a face to the name.
But yeah, Tall Tales and Legends, they took a lot of American folklore and just majorly embellished it for the sake of a movie.
Oh, of course.
So it's not very accurate. And then...
Oh.
So check those out. I've yet to check them out, but if you check them out and you really like them, you can comment on our Facebook or direct message us and tell us what you thought about some of the things we talked about.
Yeah.
With pop culture.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about Paul Bunyan? Paul
Bunyan, it's kind of funny. You've got Johnny Appleseed, who's, like, planting trees. And, like, loves nature.
I didn't even think about that.
I just thought about that.
Dude, we chose
like
two
when
polar opposite
talking
people.
about him, I'm like, yeah, I feel like Paul Bunyan's, like, way on the other end. He's, like, you know, on the industrial, like, logging end of things. Like, not planting trees at all. But, yeah, Paul Bunyan, you've probably heard, and also learn some about his stories and American folklore. The tales of Paul Bunyan have been shared among lumberjacks for as long as lumberjacks have been around in places like Wisconsin, Maine, and Pennsylvania, to California and Canada.
Oh, wow, he's got a far stretch.
Oh, yeah. Once, you know, logging kind of made its way, he just kind of traveled along with, you know, the industry, cool. Basically. So lumberjacks have been yarning about his stories. For many years. And yarning, by the way, cool word of the day. I believe its origin is like Canadian slang.
Really?
Yes. It means to tell a long or implausible story. So it plays really...
Yeah, that's super cool. Yarning. We'll have to remember that one. We can definitely use that.
Yeah.
In the future.
Definitely. The way that I imagine, like, lumber crews would sit around and they'd be yarning around a campfire.
Spreading stories
and legends about... These stories passed down from lumberjack crews came around a time when the wilderness was still a very frightening place and logging was very hazardous. The folklore around Paul Bunyan helped offset these fears, sort of making it more of like a place of wonder. It wasn't until 1910 that the first stories of Paul Bunyan were written and published by James McGilvray in the Round River Drive, and later came the advertising pamphlets like introducing Mr. Paul Bunyan of Westwood, California, which was for the Red River Lumber Company. There was some dispute over the truths and embellishments between those who wrote about him. Between folklorists and authors, as well as those that used the long-told stories to benefit the logging industry.
That's cool.
So there were lots of people that wrote about him, whether it was true story to embellish them to make, you know, the logging industry feel like not such a bad thing.
Right, a recruitment tactic. It's
right.
Like how the Army used that game America's Army in like the 1990s to like attract kids to join the military by making a video game because it's relatable.
Because it's a booming industry too, so instead of
Come be like Paul Bunyan, you're gonna be super cool.
Right. But anyways, despite the conflict, Paul Bunyan became a national folk hero, and at least from the stories I've read, I can definitely tell what's a yarn and what is not. So Paul Bunyan was a huge and powerful giant man that stood 7 feet tall and had a stride of 7 feet. He was known for his strength and although not the brightest, he was also known for some cleverness in difficult situations. He also had a trusty ox named Babe.
Babe!
He was a big blue ox that had the strength of 9 horses and was said to have weighed 5,000 pounds.
5,000 pounds?
5,000 pounds.
No way!
Real heavy ox. What that converts into tons.
Because elephants are 2 tons, right?
Yeah, I don't know how many pounds are in
I
a
feel
ton.
like an ox could not weigh that much.
Yeah, that's definitely not true. I'll just say
also,
that.
I like the name is Babe.
I know. It's like a cute pet name for a giant... a cute pet name for a giant
blue
ox.
ox.
So apparently, I don't remember this, but Babe was actually originally a pure white ox.
Really?
But then there was like a really cold winter where it was so cold that the snow
Was it Fimblevetter?
It might have been. There's some overlap there. But the winter, it was so cold that the snow was blue, and it snowed like that for a number of days. And Babe,
that's a yarn.
Yeah, that's a yarn for sure.
Turned blue because
he turned blue because
so
he
cold.
laid in the snow and it was so cold, so he turned blue and he just stayed that way.
I guess that's better than beating a Willy Wonka blueberry thing that made the one girl turn into
that's
a
true.
blueberry.
She turned into a big blueberry. Yeah, that sucks. So, anyways, together Paul Bunyan and Babe accomplished many incredible feats with their combined physical strength. They were able to drastically change the landscape, clearing large swaths of trees in the blink of an eye, and often created permanent landforms. Apparently they dug a hole for a reservoir that they were using to, once they would cut down trees, they put the logs in the reservoir, and that reservoir is now Lake Superior.
Really? That's super cool.
Yeah. Supposedly, they are responsible to this flat by flipping over the mountains and leveling them out. Apparently, when doing this, he accidentally erased the Kansas-Nebraska state boundary. This became a challenge since Paul couldn't read or write, so he entered too far north, and it was too crooked.
Oh, so that explains the weird little, notch between Kansas and Nebraska.
Well, so apparently that actually became the channel of the Republican River. So
Interesting.
the story says.
This is kind of cool because it almost is more interesting.
The story says.
This is kind of cool because it almost is more like ancient mythology where they were explaining landmarks and different natural occurrences through stories.
Yeah, I came across a lot of references to landforms and stuff like that kind of gives credit to Paul Bunyan, whether it was a purposeful thing or just he accidentally created.
I mean, that makes sense. You make a giant lumberjack.
Right.
With a super powerful ox, and he's also super strong. Yeah. Explain away your land features you don't get with the...
So, the boundary of Nebraska and Kansas actually was eventually drawn after Paul Bunyan's friend, who I was not familiar with him, but he's also another folklore character. And I think he's usually talked about whenever it's a story that involves Paul Bunyan. But his name was Feebled Feebleson.
Feebled Feebleson?
Feebleson.
Feebled Feebleson.
Yes, that was his name. Definitely not a real person, you can tell. Just from the name.
Definitely not.
But he started experimenting with eagles and bumblebees.
Eagles and bumblebees.
And I'm not sure,
was he breeding them?
I don't know.
Because that does not work. There is no way in hell that works. They don't have the same parts.
It didn't explain that. So, you're just kind of old Feebleson, did
was
this.
Experimenting with
but
eagles and bees.
Apparently, after 15 years, he had an eagle-sized bee that he could attach a plow to which made a beeline between the state, created like that really straight divide between them, and he reestablished the state line. So Paul Bunyan fucked up and then Feebledson fixed it with his eagle-sized piece. I thought it was kind of
That is awesome.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Yes. Another tale tells of a logjam that occurred in the Wisconsin River that piled up 200 feet high and jammed up the river a mile upstream. The crew was unable to logjam until Paul Bunyan shows up with his ox, which he basically just put Babe in front of the logjam in the river, and then he shot him in the ass with a rifle, which didn't hurt him.
He shot his own ox with a rifle?
It didn't.
Rifles weren't that powerful back then. I'm sure it was just like a little mosquito
a little,
sting.
So, yeah, he basically did that, and, the ox thought that it was just flies, so he swished his tail around.
And
it was powerful enough that he pushed... It was powerful enough that he pushed the current to go in the reverse direction and basically, unclogged the logjam. Which, to me, I just, love that cleverness. It's
that's super
it's sort
clever.
Of like redneck clever.
That's super
It's sort
clever.
of like redneck cleverness because
I mean, you could easily say that Babe just rammed its horns into the
right. He easily probably could have done that, but instead he's like, I'm gonna shoot him in the ass with my rifle, and just
honestly, that might play more of a part in his view of being kind of unintelligent. He shoots him in the butt, and that's kind of probably the most unintelligent way he could have done that.
Right, exactly. But that's kind of the endearing thing about Paul Bunyan. It is really endearing. He's just, he's not really educated, but somehow he finds a way to solve a problem. Maybe the weirdest way of solving it.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
So, another thing I'm going to talk about is, Paul Bunyan, a lot of his stories actually revolve around him and his crew being fed. Because, they're working this,
they probably
labor-intensive,
I feel like all construction workers or manual laborers, what they really want in life is a giant feast.
Yeah.
That's the reward they want.
Exactly. So there's a lot of stories that just kind of talk about because there were just high demands because some of, the jobs that they were doing, he'd have large crews and you gotta feed them somehow. He had several hired cooks that kept busy with a large-scale oven and griddles. The oven was so a cook would place a loaf of bread in one oven on one end. He'd go to the other end to get the first loaf, and it would already be burned to a crisp. That's how long the oven was.
Oh my gosh.
That you would walk the stretch of the oven, and your bread would already be... and your bread would already be burnt.
That's crazy. And also doesn't seem that intelligent either.
No, just have other ovens.
Right, have other
a lot
ovens,
of small ovens.
or make it short enough that when it comes out the other side it's done and can't be overcooked.
Just get a double stack oven instead
of
a long one.
For real though, this seems very not efficient.
Right. This I like. To keep the griddle top greased, Paul Bunyan would strap hams and he would skate on the...
Wait, he strapped hams to their feet and they used them as ice skates?
Yeah, to grease it with hams.
Oh my, can we try that? Is
Yeah.
that a video we can make? I feel like we can make that video. Let's
It's been a
strap
while
hams
since
to
I've
our
gone
feet.
skating, but I'd give it a try.
I can't usually ice skate because I have terrible
Give it a try.
I can't usually ice skate because I have terrible
For the
ankles.
sake of this podcast, I would do that.
I would try it.
Just,
That's hilarious. I want to
Right.
know if it's possible. Let's myth bust that shit.
Yeah, we should. We should definitely do a series of videos where we like try
myth busting, but we have to come up
videos where we like try
myth busting, but we have to come up with a different thing to call it so we don't get like fucked over on copyright.
Tall
tail busting.
Let's see, what other food story is there? One story tells of Paul taking a full load. He burns the slashings of wood of the trees around the shoreline of the lake to basically get the lake boiling, and he made pea soup in the lake by boiling it.
He made pea soup
and apparently
Lake Superior?
No, not Lake Superior. This, I don't know what lake it was, but because that would be like hella huge, but it was a lake and it lasted them all winter.
You know, he could have used some help from the Leviathan for that.
I know, right?
They could have boiled
just
that
call
right
that
up
dude
for
up,
him.
be like, yo, I need somebody to boil these, please. Yo, I need somebody to boil these, please. Like,
yo, Leviathan, fellow mythological being here.
Can you get here by 12 noon?
I need to make some
I got a
pea
hungry
soup.
crew waiting for pea soup.
Yes.
More towards like a somber part.
Oh no.
And this is something that I never read about or heard about like when I was growing up learning about Paul Bunyan. But I actually came across a couple of stories about the death of Babe.
No, I don't want to hear about the cat.
Talk about it, so I'm going to cover some of these.
Aww.
So, lumbermen of the Northwest say Babe died of eating too many hot stove lids.
Wait, the actual lids?
Yeah.
Babe!
He thought that they were griddle cakes.
They're basically pancakes.
Yeah.
And was eating
and he was just like
stove lids.
Yeah, going to town, and then I guess it just killed him because you can only eat so many of those before you die.
Well, I imagine you can't pass them, so it probably caused major intestinal blockage.
Probably. It's sad. Another story tells of the Paul had no choice. This is really fucked up. Paul had no choice but to butcher Babe.
No!
I know.
No, that did not happen. I don't believe that. I don't care.
They
I
didn't
would
talk about
starve
this
to
in
death
the
before I would
children's
eat
books.
my pet. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. If, like, Babe is supposed to be his
Say whether or not he ate him, but if it was hard times, it was hard times. But it goes on to say that he sold his bones to the Smithsonian Institute, passing it off as a mastodon.
Funny story that you say Smithsonian Institute. This is completely a side tangent, and I'm in high school. I was in the play Get Smart. My sophomore year of high school was my first year in actual school, not homeschooled. I tried out for the fall play, and we were doing Get Smart, and I got into it, and I was playing this Swedish princess. And at one point, I get brainwashed, and Maxwell Smart has to save me. And it's like Chinese like kimono dress thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was brainwashed by I can't remember who the villain is, but basically like all of his henchwomen are like Asian ladies in like kimonos. So I'm also in one, and like kimonos. So I'm also in one, and the way that Maxwell Smart breaks my brainwashing. He says something about the Smithsonian Institute because he wanted to take me there before I was brainwashed. And my line was literally to yell Smithsonian Institute at the top of my lungs, and then not shoot him in the head.
Smithsonian Institute.
Yes. Sorry. Side tangent.
No, good side story. Yeah, I thought that was interesting for sure. Sad.
But he sold his pet to the Smithsonian. I could never do that.
Yeah.
I could not eat
I don't
my
care
cats.
if it's hard times, like, you know,
I could not eat my
if
cats.
I, like, had food, this is, like, I've thought about this post-apocalyptic scenario. Like, if I come across food, I'm gonna give it to my cats.
Same!
I would feed my
cats. I would feed my cats before I ate.
Yeah, like, I just...
How did he eat his pet? I think this is slander, and I don't agree with it.
Yeah, it's sad. But, so, there's another story. This one I found the most interesting. It begins with the story of the Great Heat. It begins with the story of the Great Heat, when the temperature didn't drop below 150 degrees.
That is not true.
Yeah, that's a yarn.
The world would be gone.
Yeah, but that's how hot it was. And that year, Paul Bunyan was drafted to fight war with the native tribes out west. Come July, it became so hot that both sides just decided to call it off. They're like,
it's too hot. I can't fight anymore.
So the native tribesmen were smart. They dug holes, like caves, into the mountains, because obviously that's where it would be very cool.
Yeah, underground.
Paul Bunyan and his ox just go up the mountains, and like the further and further they go, like they just get closer to the sun.
And
they just get closer to the sun.
And it gets hotter.
And so he sees that Babe is struggling, and Babe finally just kind of like lays down because it's just too hot for him to go on any further. So he decided to build a mountain over him to protect him from the sun. He stacked rocks on him. But then the next day it got even hotter, which actually ended up...
He baked him alive.
It roasted Babe, and then he died.
He really isn't that smart, is he?
No, that's the thing.
He's never heard about, like...
So then I guess like 3 months pass or something. It's like winter, and then the natives come out of the caves, and then they're starving. And they actually try eating Babe, but his skin is too tough for them to eat. So they don't actually like get to feed off of him because they're like, this.
Well, that's good
too
at
tough.
least. Poor Babe. Babe gets the short end of the stick.
Yeah, but apparently the caves and the rocks that covered Babe can be seen near Colorado Springs. They're known as the Garden of the Gods. Which I'm sure there's like probably a lot of mythology around landscapes like that, but I thought it was interesting that they tied in like a story.
Absolutely, that is super cool.
As like fucked up as it is.
Yeah.
So pop culture, and poems, including poets like Robert Frost and Shel Silverstein, as well as musical pieces and theater productions. I actually was like looking that up on YouTube, and there's like some fun musicals about.
We should
Paul
watch
Bunyan.
those one night.
Yeah. Walt Disney also produced an animated short of Paul Bunyan in 1958. I did watch that. Very classic, great Disney.
Oh, I'm sure.
Storytelling of Paul Bunyan.
Great.
So if you're a fan of Disney, you can definitely find that on YouTube. So yeah, that's pretty much all the research I did.
That's awesome.
I was trying to find more stuff on him as far as like the real Paul Bunyan.
I feel actual legendary figure than Johnny Appleseed was.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I think I did read that he was like buried somewhere in like Wisconsin or Michigan, but like I think a lot of it is just like stories told by.
Yeah, I think he was.
There might have been a guy that was just like real strong.
I think he was more fabricated than Johnny Appleseed was. Like
absolutely.
And some that are completely false, that are just made up things, and some that are actually rooted into a real person. And
right.
I think Paul Bunyan is more one of those like more legendary ones than actual real person.
Which I'd be kind of curious to hear like more stories.
Real person.
Which I'd be kind of curious to hear like more stories that may be related to like a man that they
like
maybe
a real
refer
person.
to.
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
Just because like that was one reason why I wanted to do Paul Bunyan. I felt like there was just like a lot of I don't know things that I could relate to working in the wilderness.
Yeah, because you used to burn prairies and stuff.
Yeah, I used to burn prairies. I wasn't like a lumberjack by any means, but I did run a chainsaw and did like a lot of like tree thinning, and that is hard work.
It is hard work.
It is very hard work, and like even just like eat and feed his crew, I was like, man, that would have been nice. Like just like when we would be working in winter, I just remember if I would like pack a lunch, my like lunch would be frozen. Like I usually had like frozen pasta salad, and like sometimes, you know, we had like a 30-minute lunch break, but we would like start, my buddy Kyle, we'd start like a little fire, and like by the time like we would get the fire started
Lunch
and
would
like
be
eat
over.
our lunch, like it would be over with, and we'd be like, well, I guess gotta put out the fire and like get back to the, you know,
That's
grind.
so cool.
And like get back to the, you know,
That's
grind.
so cool.
But I mean, yeah, I have mad respect for like that type of work. And
Absolutely. I have a friend in Peoria who is a lumberjack. Like, I know him from college. He was actually studying to go into neuroscience, but ended up deciding, and now he is like a lumberjack as well.
That's awesome.
And he also dresses like I think Paul Bunyan would have dressed.
That's
I
great.
really think Paul Bunyan was like the original hipster.
For sure.
Like, or at least
Flannel.
hipster male, like beard, mustache, flannel, beanie. Like, that's what I
Right.
picture for Paul Bunyan. So, I believe the original hipster.
Oh, for sure.
They just all need pet giant oxes.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know, I just felt like I kind of related in that sense, and
Absolutely.
you know, that rough and tough type of job.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you know?
Type of job.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you know what time it is?
I think I know what time it is.
It's the Tall Tales Takedown.
That's right. It's time for the Tall Tales Takedown.
Tall Tales Takedown.
This is a very easy choice.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll see how
Johnny
it goes.
Appleseed
But
versus Paul Bunyan.
Who's gonna win? Johnny Appleseed versus Paul Bunyan. Fight to the death. Paul Bunyan does get his ox since it's such a staple. Johnny Appleseed is a fucking pacifist.
Dude, unless Johnny Appleseed
Johnny
has,
Appleseed would win in a kindness
has
battle.
like a slim chance. If
I mean, I guess maybe if he poisoned his cider, he could.
ooh, that would
But I
be,
feel like with how big Paul Bunyan is supposed to be
Paul
and how
Bunyan
big
is
the ox is,
huge.
he would need so much poison to poison both of
Dude,
them.
also
Oxes.
huge.
He would need so much poison to poison both of
Dude,
them.
also Paul Bunyan, if there's one thing that they have in common, I meant to mention this earlier, is like they're both alcoholics. So, like,
well, he could poison him then.
maybe they just have a drinking contest.
Yes, drinking contest.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Drinking contest.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah, they
who
go
would
to a
win the
tavern,
drinking contest,
and
though?
they have a drinking contest. And, you know, if it's cider, maybe
Johnny
maybe
Appleseed.
Johnny
But if
Appleseed.
it's anything else, Paul
but
Bunyan.
if it's
he's
anything
huge.
else, Paul Bunyan,
I
mean,
think physical
like, his
fit
body
feist-
weight is so much larger.
I think actual Paul Bunyan and Babe. Yay, they win.
Yeah,
Yay.
big surprise. It was still worth talking about because,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
Tall
it's-
Tales Takedown.
Yeah, Tall Tales Takedown. I don't care how ridiculous it is. We're going to do this every time because it cracks me up. Because it reminds me of your bug coliseums and shit. Like, we're going to do this and shit. Like, we're going to do this forever. But, yeah, Paul Bunyan is the champion of this Tall Tales Takedown. And I think that brings us to the conclusion of our episode. Huge shout out to Dr. Mr. Dreamer, aka Ralph Schenk, for
Yes.
our Tall Tales Takedown sound effect. This is the first aka Ralph Schenk for
Yes.
our Tall Tales Takedown sound effect. This is the first episode.
Yeah, this is the first time we're using it,
Actually,
and it's so good.
It may have been in the last episode. I haven't edited episode
Oh.
3 yet, so it might be in that episode as well.
That's
But
true.
this is the first time we've recorded since we've had it, so a huge thank you to him. We also have .com/TallTalesPodcast. If you want to DM us or comment on our posts, hit us up. We want to talk to you. We want to know who's listening to our podcast. We want to know what you like. We want to know what you don't like.
Give us
we
input.
want
We
to-
love that.
Customize this podcast for the people who listen to it to make sure you continue liking it, and also add new things that you want us, your suggestions. We also have an Instagram at Tall Tales Podcast. And then YouTube, just for now, search Tall Tales and For now, search Tall Tales and Cocktails, and it's one of the first things that pops up. We will have more information coming soon about a challenge to make it so we can get a custom YouTube URL.
Yeah, stay tuned.
So listen up for that. And also, please tell your friends. Share our episode post. Share our podcast. Tell people to listen to us because we're pretty fun and we want to hang out with more people and, teach people about mythology because it's a fun time.
Yeah, we're trying to spread the interest.
We're trying to spread the knowledge and the comedy.
Yeah, that's all we're trying to do. So
knowledge
check out all of our platforms.
We're pretty drunk on these Appletinis, but I think we can do it. On the count of 3, should I count down or count up?
Count down.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Adventure is now, and adventure is next time. See you guys!